I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story. Are you like me and you hate cold calling? I detest cold calling so much that I don't even do it. But we're going to challenge that mindset today with a world record-breaking outbound sales marketing maven who has arguably built the deepest client acquisition methodology of all time, the Justin Michael method. So if you want to heat up your cold calling for greater revenue success, then this show's for you. Hey, before we get started, just want to bounce something off of you. Over the last 6 to 8 weeks, I guess, I have had an inordinate amount of people reach out to me and ask about me doing a Business of Story mastermind that they could join for some ongoing training, storytelling, camaraderie, networking, working through business issues, and so forth. So I started doing my due diligence, and I found that a lot of people have a lot of different ideas as to what a mastermind is compared to hybrid training, which is both mastermind and ongoing training, to just a peer group like Vistage might be. So I'm not sure what is the best way to go with the Business of Story because I do definitely want to launch this community in early 2024, and I would love to get your take on it. Number one, I'm thinking about making it a year-long commitment so that we would have a consistent group in there. I'm looking at small groups, 8 to 12 people versus the large 50 to 100 to 250 masterminds. I kind of feel like that 8 to 12 people of like minds and like businesses might be the best bet, but I don't know. I'm wondering what you would like if you were interested in something like this. Could you shoot me a note over at park@businessofstory.com and answer some questions for me like, would you want to meet just once a month? Maybe it's a 3-hour session. Maybe it's every week, 1 hour per week. Do you like to have special guests on? What works best for you? Because I'm thinking about having both the group and then have some one-on-one coaching with me and some office hours to answer questions. The bottom line is what I really want to do is help you excel through the stories you tell while working through real storytelling brand challenges that you've got through your communications and sales and marketing, connect you with like-minded professionals so that you could all grow together, and of course, network to help build your business. So if you got some ideas on what you think would really work for you or others, please shoot me a note at park@businessofstory.com. The last thing I wanted to mention to you is that my first quarter of 2024 is really filling up with keynotes and workshops. So if you have got a sales conference, a revenue kickoff, or any sort of event where you're looking for a keynote speaker and or a mastery course, then reach out to me today. Again, you've got my email, park@businessofstory.com. I can provide you certainly keynotes, in-person training, hybrid training, online training, whatever works best for your team to help you excel through the stories you tell. We will help build a common storytelling language within your organization, show your people how to use the and, but, therefore, the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact, and even the 10-step story cycle system for their long-form communications and presentations. We have been growing brands by as much as 600%, growing engagement online by 400%. Knocking it out of the park with sales presentations simply because people are using these frameworks to clarify their stories, amplify their impact, and ultimately simplify their life, in addition to amazing revenue generation. So if I can be of service to you, shoot me a note over at park@businessofstory.com. Now, if you've taken my online course or have experienced one of my in-person mastery courses, then you have heard me talk about why the ABT, the and, but, therefore, Agile Narrative Framework is so effective. The ABT uses the 3 forces of storytelling that are primal, pattern-seeking, problem-solving, decision-making, buying limbic brain absolutely loves. And those forces are agreement, contradiction, and consequence. Today's guest has found similar ways to hack through the noise and hook the hearts of prospects, especially cold calling prospects, that he details in his new book, Sales Superpowers, a new outbound operating system to drive explosive pipeline growth, which we'll explore today.
When you cold call someone, no matter what you say, you've triggered their croc brain, the lizard brain. It triggers the fight or flight because you've just interrupted them or you irritate them, right? So you have to calm them down like walking up on a horse. So you got to calm down the old brain so that the front brain can kick in and start to make sense of you. With emails, if you just bounce off the front brain, it's just like ads in the movie theater. You have to try to provoke and spur emotion out of the old brain system so that they see it unconsciously.
Justin Michael has driven over $1 billion in pipeline revenue for 200 plus startups he's advised and over 25,000 sales representatives. I mean, that's a lot. As an ex-Salesforce and LinkedIn revenue generator, Justin is the global authority on AI-based outbound prospecting alongside legends like Aaron Ross, Josh Braun, and Mark Roberg. Justin is the best-selling author of Sales Superpowers and Tech-Powered Sales, which prove that over 75% of top funnel can be automated by raising your technology quotient, or your TQ. Today, we discuss how to craft powerful openings, as Justin believes your opening is the new close, how to use storytelling to trigger the limbic buying brain, and why all top sales winners are first and foremost disruptive, and that's how they warm up their cold calling prospects. So please welcome to the Business of Story, Justin Michael. Justin, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. How's it going?
It's going great. You know, I have our mutual friend, Darren Disa, or is it Dessa? I just met him to thank, and he comes to us from Lucerne, Switzerland. So this is truly an international show. I think you're in London, is that right? Or were?
Yeah, I've been doing a little traveling, but not for work, more just to see the world. But yeah, Darren's great and spoke really highly of this podcast, and it's a chance to get my techniques, I think, in front of a wider audience, which was the purpose of this book.
Well, we are all in the sales world, and it's so funny, Justin, that I will go into like my workshops, my Business of Story workshops, and it'll be the room full of leaders, and 60 of them say, and I'll say, hey, how many of you are leaders in here? And of course, they all raise their hand, and then I'll say, and how many of you are in sales? And half the hands will go, maybe 2/3 of the hands will go down. And I say, I hate to break it to you, but we're all in sales in one way, shape, or form. Isn't that right?
That's the truth. I think that in this world of noise, opening is the new closing. And I ran into that phrase through my mentor, Tony Hughes. And I think we found it referenced with Anthony Ian Reno, who's a great writer for business stuff. But I realized that in this world of automation of email, we didn't really solve the problem. So, Henry Ford said, if I had asked them what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And now we're trying to solve the sales problem with artificial intelligence and ChatGPT and AI. So what have we done? Now we can send 1,000 emails a day and do, 10,000 robocalls and have GPT write the messaging for us. But the problem is, if everyone has the technology, we're not actually all on the highway. We're actually suffocating the prospect. So it's a crazy problem right now, which I've attempted to fix in the book, and we can get into how to do that, to humanize the sales process, to slow down, make it count, go omni-channel. Some really interesting ways we can do that, but that's the problem right now.
Well, we have been bombarded with, as I call it, the cacophony of communication ever since the internet took over, right? And then social media just amplified the noise. And if we are going to use bots to reach out and just plaster our prospects with messages, why do we remotely think that would work? That seems like we're just writing our own, downfall.
Well, what's interesting is first in the mid 2000s, they came out with email automation and sequencers. And I wrote a book about that called Tech Powered Sales on HarperCollins. And you could slightly customize it like, hey, first name, I see that your company grew by 25 people, and you could put in these sort of curly brackets because we've all gotten one that said, hey, first name, like the
Right.
broken link, right? But now with ChatGPT, it can look at your LinkedIn profile, come up with like, you went to University of Michigan, go Wolverines, here's the Chinese food down the street that you like, common connections, and it can basically create these faux personalization sentences, and then everybody has that ability. So you don't know now whether you're talking to an AI or a machine, and you get a call, and actually the audio of the book you're holding is a very sophisticated AI. It's not my voice, but it's recorded. It's very hard to tell. It's not human.
Yeah, I mean, just because it's AI doesn't help you. I mean, if so, let me back up. So you're a human outreaching, right? And you are sending emails and you are doing your best to write the perfect email and maybe even pull some off now and again. You're telling stories in there. You're finding an opening. We're going to explore this a little bit deeper, your experience in openings. But here you are trying to do your best and you're still not being effective because everyone else is doing the same thing. So we are already bombarding these people. It's not working. Now layer on the multitude of problems with AI and sending out that much input. What is the answer? How do you get around this?
Yeah, so the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell. So I'll be 44 in January. I've been selling for 22 years. And I moved up to San Francisco. I'd worked in like tech incubators in my 20s. So right around 30 years old, I moved up to San Francisco. And I got into the mobile marketing industry, and I went to Salesforce Marketing Cloud, but I had no college degree, right? And so I was studying mobile responsive design. I started to realize that 80% of email was going to happen on a smartphone. But then I started looking into the neuroscience of it, and a 3 paragraph email takes 11 seconds to read, while a 3 sentence email only takes 3 seconds. The 3 paragraph email triggers fight or flight, like the old croc brain amygdala. And, C levels typically communicate in short form. So I realized that as I was studying more and more into mobile advertising and mobile marketing, that the emails need to be adapted to that. But then artificial intelligence can catch up to that. Then I started doing cold calling, and I noticed that the way that people open cold calls was broken. So then I thought, let me Elon Musk first principles breakdown, Buckminster Fuller, and take the 7 pillars of what the top funnel is. Because there's this beautiful lineage of like Sandler, Miller Hyman, Challenger Spin to take us down the funnel. But how about getting the piece of business? We got Grant Cardone, and we've got Jeb Blunt and Mike Weinberg and Ian Reno, and lots of great voices here laying the foundations. But how do we then innovate that piece? And my father was a linguist. He was a linguistics PhD. And what I realized is I needed a meta layer. So I came up with this idea called heuristics. And I'll hat tip to David Hoffeld, exceptional book called Science of Selling. The idea is that communication to work and to stand out has to be done with formulas and frameworks, not templates or scripts. Because if there's 11 million tech sellers, or your audience, there's 400 million small business owners and entrepreneurs, as soon as one template goes viral, everybody starts getting the template. And I used to have a CEO, and I'd log into their email, and I would get this same subject line, appropriate person, boom, 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 because there's just like this breakthrough email program, and that was like the best template. But then I thought, wait, what if I said correct person, or who has this up? And I started using the idea conceptually of that subject line, but iterating it, and then it worked. So what I've basically created is like a Bob Ross system here across the 7 pillars of the top funnel that are possible, and reimagine them. And I can list the 7 if it's interesting.
Let's do it. So is this the Justin method, the Justin
It's
Michael method? Is that what you're talking about
Yes,
here?
it's the Justin Michael method, and I hope people chuckle. Like the Alan Parsons project. I've actually met Alan Parsons, but Dr. Evil, right? Because you got to be pretty conceited to name a method yourself. But in the end of the book, I say this is really the Park Howell method because it's a metaphor. It's to make it your own through this heuristics process. So here we go. We got timing, targeting, and triggers. We're going out there to do archery. We better not just shoot into the forest. We got to put up the right target. So the list is the strategy. I've heard Ryan Rice or Joey Gilkey say this. I like that idea. Then we go into email, broken, reimagine it. Cold calling, broken, reimagine it. Social selling, this whole LinkedIn thing, I used to work for them, the Empire State Building, reimagine it. Visual prospecting, video prospecting, reimagine it. And then, yeah, I think I got to 7. I can't count, but I think I'm going to throw ChatGPT and AI because honestly, that's more of a blocker right now. If you just start hitting the ChatGPT button and firing emails, you're like, oh, that's ChatGPT. So I basically lay out a strategy in this book to reimagine the last 100 years since Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone in 1876. And it's applicable to 400 million people. And this book should revolutionize outbound prospecting, customer acquisition. It's the deepest book in the history of the world written on this subject. It's based on breaking down hundreds of other methods, and rather than emulating or copying them, doing sort of like how David Sandler went and built a system, I've done that now for just the top of the funnel. And I think that's why it's been so effective. It took me like 300 hours to write it.
So take us through it a little bit, would you? You quickly ran through those points. Can you kind of take us through this process?
Yeah, so most people, when they call you, they say, hey, Park, did I catch you at a bad time? And that expression comes from 2011 from Aaron Ross, Predictable Revenue. It worked well because it gets you to say no rather than getting you to say yes. Like, do you want to talk? No. It's like, did I catch you at a bad time? No. So it's like a strange negative reverse, which Chris Voss talks about. But the problem is if I say, hey, did I catch you at a bad time? Or can I get 30 seconds of your time? It's what's called a PBO, a permission-based opener. I think I have some cool functionality on my computer. Do you see the balloons? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw the balloons.
New Mac OS. I'm also a magician. No, just kidding. So I am really big on opening cold calls with something I called Route Rune Multiply in the book, where I actually just say your full name to open calls. And I stole that from Dale Carnegie. The most beautiful sound in the human language is Park Howell. So when I call Park Howell, I say, Park Howell? You go, yes. They go, hey, just curious, who heads up your marketing over there? And you would say, oh, no, it's not me. It's Lucy. Because 30% of the time, the data is bad. The phone numbers are bad. Right? I get in this book, and one of the biggest problems is no one's picking up the phone anymore. And no one's answering emails anymore. So you really need sophistication around data vendors. I have some virtual assistants that can go in and call the phone numbers in advance, like human verified phone numbers, or even test the channels. And they can reach out and test Park's email and call Park and then give it to me and say, hey, Park prefers email. He prefers phone. It's a company called Cloudlead. So like first we reimagine the call opener. Then we get into emails, and the emails look like text messages or ad units, and then they're visual with Venn diagrams. Then we get into social selling, and it's not just sending a connected pitch, like what's the perfect email? It's a chat flow. I've created a choreography called the fourth frame, and it's a way to, develop business right out of the LinkedIn DMs. And then I have a technique when you connect with people on LinkedIn to drop a video from the LinkedIn app so you don't have to click away. So suddenly you just see like multiple videos playing. Yeah, and then there's a whole exploration in the second book of ways to use ChatGPT and OpenAI, because this was a 96,000 word manuscript, went through 7 publishers to do it, and we cut it in half. So if Sales Superpowers, the book you're holding up.
This one here?
Shameless plug. And there's a part 2. And that one does say Justin Michael Method 1.0. So like in a nutshell, that's how I started figuring this out. So I just really used first principles, design thinking, and scientific method to run experiments. And so like I became very good at natural abilities at top funnel work, the pale blue collar. And right around the time I was 37, Silicon Valley came calling to build an artificial intelligence model of my brain while prospecting. And so I flew down to Silicon Valley, and there's a company that raised a few $1 million. I had 17 engineers, and I sent 5 million emails and built it up to 100 concurrent customers and did massive levels of A/B testing. So a lot of my theories were in that proving ground empirically.
So what were they doing? Were they taking those emails and you're thinking to try to create a bot that could do this for people to just add to the noise that you are now cursing?
Well, back at the time, if you can imagine 2017, 2018, 7, 8 years ago, it was actually very hard to do any type of personalization at scale, which is why I've called it relevance. Back then, it was actually very novel to be able to take an email and send it to 1,000 people and have every single email be different based on changing parameters per email. So that was like fire in the wheel back then. It was right, Arthur C. Clarke's law that, any advanced technology looks initially like magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now this is table stakes. So we've gotten too good at all of it too fast. However, my heuristics concept holds up because we can still look at the formation of an email like the opening humor heuristic. And then I can do social proof, like how have I helped other people like Park Howell, podcasters, with their marketing? And then I can look at like the word thank you and think of gratitude. So I can use puzzle pieces of the connotation of the linguistics, and I can then carve the angel out of the marble. When ChatGPT spits out pabulum in vanilla text, I can carve it into something useful that reflects my differentiation, the human behind the machine.
Now, Dhiren, when he was telling me about you and introducing me to your work, was really talking about your expertise in openings. Can you take us a little bit deeper into that? Because I hadn't really heard of that coming from one soul. So I'd love to know how you approach openings.
Yeah, so the majority of the sales training business, and most authors, could be 10,000 of them, talk about, right? They're already interested, and now we're doing qualification, discovery, demoing, presentation, right? Progression, negotiation, and closing. But if opening's the new closing, it's like, how do we penetrate a Fortune 500 corporation where every P&L holder, every decision maker is getting 250 emails a day? How do we get them to decide later with 11 decision makers per Gartner if we only have one person we're contacting initially? How do we get our foot in the door? Now, there's even sales stunts in the book, in the second book, where I talk about sending a drone without the remote control, or all this Stu Heineck and Dale Dupree contact marketing. Now, there's this guy, Dan Walschmidt, he sends them a sword that is literally carved. Like, we're going to win the battle together. It's like $1,000 sword engraved. And it's like I think it gets like a 99% response rate.
Why not? Yeah.
This book goes into everything possible to open, like to get the person to talk to you, to start engaging. Because right now, prospects worldwide have a perfect system. They just do nothing. They know after your 33rd email sequenced and automated, you'll go away. They know after 4 voicemails, you'll go away. But the minute you leave 14 or 50, like they realize you're not going away. And if it's really you and you're adding your personality into it and you're persisting, it's so refreshing for them. They just choose you out of the sea of spam and automation. They see a real human there. And that's where I look at like Seth Godin, the purple cow. I wear a lot of animal hats because great metaphors for sales.
So when you are thinking about an opening, do you have kind of a set heuristic or framework that you use?
Yeah. So when I send emails, I tend to send them 1 to 3 word in the subject line. A lot of times it's the word growth, like one action word or something that sort of looks like modern art, a strange subject line. I tend to use a cluster. So what I do is I send a message on day 1 that's 3 sentences. And then day 2, the thoughts bump, and then day 3, a picture. But that's all bumping up to the original email. So it creates like a little thread. So instead of sending like an email on day 1, an email on day 3, email day 7, email on 14, my claim to fame is I figured out omni-channel, like linking the channels, how to do 7 touches in the first 24 hours. Because all the research to unlock a meeting is it takes 5 to 12 touches to get a meeting. And some people are saying it's like 1,000 now. So it creates like a bee swarming effect. So I call you, leave a voicemail, send an email, connect on LinkedIn. You just avoid all that. The next day I do thoughts, you see it. Next day I send some kind of interesting picture, and then I wait a day. I was a case study in a book called Combo Prospecting, where I go really into triples and quads, but you can automate all that now. And if you're the one, if I'm reaching out to Park on 7 channels and other vendors are just spamming you, just emailing you over and over again, you're going to see me unconsciously. And I'm going to, I'm going to be signaling the noise. So for now, that's how we do it. I mean, it's going to get crazier. It's going to get harder and harder and harder. But I built this book to be a time capsule so that the formulas and meta frameworks will last for the next 100 years.
And that's all in your new book. Another plug for you, Sales Superpowers, right? A new outbound operating system to drive explosive pipeline growth. Now, it comes back to this question. When you go to Amazon and you look up sales books, there's tens of thousands of them. Why did you take this on to compete in that noise? And how is yours completely different than any others out there?
When we go back to the 7 pillars, I literally have challenged every facet. So the truth is that if you look from a heuristics perspective, most of the techniques right now that are popular are 100 years old. Now, Todd Capone was my boot camp instructor at Salesforce in Indianapolis. And he actually has a podcast about sales history where he walks you back and shows you sales training in 1910 that looks almost exactly to today. So, if people are doing a similar opener, like, how you been? How are you? Did I catch you at a bad time? Can I get 30 seconds of your time? This is a cold call. I hate making it. You hate getting it. Well, if, tens of millions of salespeople open the call with that exact phraseology, and you come in, say a full name and ask a question, it totally throws the prospect because you're 1 out of 1,000. I'm training a lot of people, but still maybe 1 in 10,000. And it's a severe pattern interrupt. So the reason my book is catching fire is its pattern interrupts the entire industry. It's like goofy foot surfboard. We're all surfing, but I'm like surfing on, a wake ski with a jetpack with my right foot forward with a wingsuit on. It's just a totally different reimagining. It doesn't mean that those don't work. They do. This just augments and makes it more effective. It sharpens the saw.
Ah, that's very cool. I want to go back to this opening sequence. And I was at a networking event here about a month ago in Phoenix, and they brought in a speaker from Chicago who was all about using the phone. And he sat up in front of the room. He did a 3-hour training on it. And he said, nobody's picking up the phone anymore and just simply calling. Everyone is emailing, and nobody wants to get your emails. So why don't you, do the pattern interrupt as you talked about and just pick up the phone and call someone. He said 2 out of 3 times they will respond to you. So I did that because I was guilty as charged. I was emailing and hitting them on LinkedIn, but I thought to myself, why? I don't want to call and bother them, which is so stupid, right? And I realized when I started thinking about my own phone, Justin, that my phone never rings. People don't call me. I get the occasional, robocall or whatever, but for the most part, people that I know worked with don't pick up the phone and call. And his point was, no one's calling. Pick up the phone. That's the pattern interrupt right there. And then you just simply start, hey, I was thinking about you, Justin. How's the family going? Just wondering if you got anything on your plate that I can be helping you with. Let me know. Then he said, I'll send you a text. He recommended that you send a text. Said, I'll send a text with my Calendly link just to see if you want, find some time to jump on. Boom, you hang up, you send the text. There's 2, points, 2 touch points within under a minute. You can do this. And by golly, I didn't get 2 out of 3 return a call, but I got close to that. And I thought, why haven't I been doing this? I've been old enough to look at technology in my world was a fax machine. That was the first time technology showed up. Like, whoa. So I've come from the old school of we only used to have telephones, but yet it seems like people aren't using them now. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah. So number one, it's illegal to send a text message unsolicited in North America. It's illegal to send a fax. You're not going to get popped for texting, but I don't recommend to my clients or audience to do that. I don't want to
Well,
throw
and
this
I will let me
elements.
preface too that these are warm markets. These are
Ah,
clients I've worked
okay.
with in the past.
Fair.
It's pick up the
Totally
phone.
fair.
I'm not just calling someone out of the blue. Yeah,
I'm helping people with totally out of the blue, typically, like net new client acquisition, like
I get
pure
you.
cold. And in this case, there's some issues with that. So let's just test the heuristics. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, you'd never send a Calendly link. It's like you're going to go on a date. It's like, hey, I'm going to send my calendar. You want to go on a date? It looks needy, and needy is creepy. So you
Okay.
never do anything in my system where you look too needy or hungry because that's going to repel, right? So for me personally, if you connect on LinkedIn, blank connect creates mystery. Rewrite your LinkedIn profile so it's a conversion mechanism. They connect with you, drop a voice note inside LinkedIn. They'll listen to it. Suddenly there's this blue bar in LinkedIn and it plays, and you can do a second one or do a video. of you at the gym or at the Starbucks or something. It's raw, it's real. And I go through how to do the video. I call this Golden Globes because if you mess up the first video, you say, hey, I didn't get a Golden Globe for that, so double video. When it comes to using the telephone, you want to use a strategy called combos, like combo prospecting. You basically call, leave voicemail, send an email. At about 4 or 5 voicemails, they will get back to you. No one listens to voicemails. They actually just read it out in visual voicemail. But what he is right about is that the saturation of touches is fast. It does work. But I'm accomplishing that by leaving a voicemail and then I send an email that says per my voicemail. Mm. Now, it's very powerful when you email someone indicating that you tried to call them because they're seeing that automation and then they see per my voicemail, like, oh, Justin actually tried to call my phone. You know, asking about family, it doesn't work. No one's lonely, bored, and afraid, looking for a friend. We're not on Facebook. People want to make money, save money, reduce risk, satisfy regulation. As Mike Bosworth said, they have 7 slots in their head. They get up there like raise the top line, hire people, right size, downsize. They're not wanting to talk about sports or their family or any of that stuff. So like 2 out of 3 things that he's recommended here, you might get a response, but you're not going to get revenue in meetings. Remember, even if you use my system and some of your metrics go down, my system designed to get buyers, those thorny, those prospects that are hard to get to, right? They're often salty, they're often tough, but we don't want to write beautiful emails and make a lot of friends and have a lot of interactions that become meaningless as far as opportunity creation. So that's really how I've calibrated it with a lot of reverse psychology and a lot of thinking about what's going to make them desire to talk to you. For example, my voicemail, I say, I'll follow up with a note. I never ask for a callback.
Mm-hmm.
Different. It's a different tonality. It's a different nuance.
And you put the control in their court. You're like,
because
hey, give me a call when you get a
yeah,
chance. It's just like, hey, I'll follow up with a note. It's kind of like implied that you can return it whether you want to or not.
it's nonchalant. So all this stuff comes under the auspices of social Aikido. In the past, you call a prospect, I interrupt you and say the reason for my call, and then we start fast hands, Aikido, rebuttals, all this. I call you, ask you if you're in charge of the thing. You say, I am. And I say, what do you normally use? And I get you talking about your existing solution and your status quo and opening up to me. Well, now you're doing all the talking, 10 seconds, 2 minutes in the call. I'm just listening, but I'm controlling you, but you feel like you're in control. So it's like that, 100-pound woman who's the third Dan Aikido master, and she's just flipping this 300-pound man like it's a piece of spaghetti. That's what we're doing in these calls. And you can watch me in the demos, and I'm fully controlling the prospect, and they're talking.
Have you used a lot of Robert Cialdini's work? I never know how to say his last name, in your thinking around the heuristics and how to use them?
He's been hugely influential, and I do pay attribution in the book. The principles of persuasion, I think there's 6, are fantastic. I also love to say his name, Dr. Robert B. Cialdini. He just sounds like a Bond villain, but he's brilliant. I mean, a lot of what you're doing, right, is you're creating trust. I have an awesome breakup email. I know Chris Voss has one email in the book, Never Split the Difference, which is like, have you given up on driving revenue? That's like his one email. But mine is, hey, could you have the courtesy to point me at the right person who handles this? Because it's congruence. People want to be congruent to their values, and they want to be courteous. And in fact, my cold call is weird because I don't try to sell you the products. I don't try to get your time. Hey, like, never say, can we meet Tuesday or Thursday? Never give a Calendly. You want to use interest-based calls to action, CTAs. So you want to say, hey, should we talk about that? Worth exploring, worth having a conversation. So what I'm doing when I call you, I'm going, are you the person that does this? So it's like being lost in the city. I'm in Times Square. I'm like, which way to Central Park? And then the person's a good Samaritan. They're like, oh, that person, because you never know who's in charge of it. So that's what routing is. That's helped a lot of reps set a lot of records. The other big thing is, like, the human brain can't read. Like, reading text, you spend all your childhood trying to read all these little hieroglyphic pictograms. When you're tired at night, your eyes go fuzzy, even if you have perfect vision. Okay, so that's because the minute you go drive in your car to get like an In-N-Out burger, the stars are clear, the road signs are clear, right? So the whole processing of the human brain is visual. Visuals process 60,000 times faster than words. So why are we emailing people? And then people say, well, Justin, you can't put images and video in the first email, but yes, you can put in the second or the third in this, right? And that's why I do the cluster. So I send an email, bump it the next day, and then send a visual. And I remember I sent a Venn diagram to the chief digital officer at McDonald's, immediate response. And then I sent it to the VP of mobile at Home Depot. This is like 2017. And he called my signature, said, pitch me. And I sort of had that Doc Brown flux capacitor moment, like in Back to the Future 2, when I hit my head on my toilet and invented time travel. I was like,
Right.
whoa, what is this? Like I've been cold calling 15 years at this point. I'd never had a C-level call my phone from an email. So the book goes into a lot of this.
What kind of visuals do you use? You just mentioned a Venn diagram for McDonald's. What are other, like, take us to a moment where you did something that really surprised you and the kind of visual you sent but worked for you?
Yeah, so I started to understand that product marketing, every website on earth has conversion rate optimization. You land on a site and there's pictures of smiling pictures. There's like a landing page and a button. And there's a story about Marissa Mayer when she was running the Google search page. She had an investor that would write emails 37, 26, 22, 19. It was the amount of words on the page. So I sat next to a product marketing leader at this company called Tune, and he'd worked at Amazon and eBay. And I started to realize that there's millions of dollars being poured into search engine optimization organically and paid ads. And you click on this little thing and then you land on a visual. And every time there's like a diagram. So I started using Venn diagrams, bar graphs. I found this company called Zight, Zight, formerly Cloud App, and you can record the screen like 3 seconds and you can put that in line in the video. So like all the GIFs or GIFs, what do you want to call it? Like hilarious, all like George Clooney bump, there's Batman bumps, there's, all sorts of different, I did just Great Gatsby GIFs for one whole year. It was really funny. We, I had a friend, he quit. And on his last day, he sent the lyrics to Justin Bieber, "What Do You Mean?" Like the breakup email. And it closed a full deal. It was a riot and it came back. So yeah, those are some ideas.
So you're having some fun with it. And how does story come into this? I mean, everything you're talking about is your way of communicating, and yours is the ubiquitous you. Anyone listening to this is to share your story in your own unique way, in your own branded way, be your personal brand, your professional brand. But when you are looking at the mechanics of doing sales, where does the narrative and the story start overlaying in the creativity and how you reach out?
Yeah, so the main issue with outreach is 99% of outreach is marketing oriented and awareness oriented and pleasure seeking, make money, cut some costs, make money. But you need pain, fear, emotional resonance. And Tony Robbins talks about this. We're risk averse, we're loss averse. And you can't just say, you can use innuendo like struggling with, hemorrhaging money, tearing their hair out. This is better when you're writing short emails and using pain, fear, emotional resonance. But there's really an aspect where you have to look at a storytelling component, like the hero's journey, whether that's Joseph Campbell or the Pixar formula. So, it's really critical to have a before after when you write an email. So I love talking about David Goggins. Like people love that book. He became a Navy SEAL. He tried 4 times to do it. And it's not interesting because the story is told at that side. It's interesting because of where he was before, how he suffered, how he's really overweight. He was doing pest control, this stuff. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, you mentioned the hero's journey, and that is, I studied it inside and out. In fact, it was the genesis for my book, Brand Bewitchery, where I created the story cycle system for branding, and it was very effective, but it's complicated. It's complex. And a lot of times people throw out this idea of, hey, use the hero's journey or even the Pixar way, but most people have a real hard time making that work for them just because it's too darn complex. Do you have any shortcuts for people on that so they can actually make it work for them?
Yeah, so I just think before after, like weight loss or something, or any goal, like this chain smoker quit smoking with the patch in the middle. So it's like when you write an email, start with, hey, we work with a company just like you, and here's where they were at the beginning. They were caught up in spreadsheets. It was taking them hours to reconcile their billing. Then we put in our AI-based accounting solution, and they were Their frustration was alleviated and they made 36% more margin that year. And so I'll very quickly, concisely, because I keep my emails under 50 words. So I advocate in this book writing emails so short it looks like a text message, even writing it with your thumbs. When you feel like I couldn't send this, send it, because then you're at the right length. Even put the whole email in the subject line. I got that idea from Oren Klaff. So to grossly oversimplify the story and the narrative arc, I would just say try to go before after. Think right brain and left brain, although this neuroscience theory has been debunked, meaning
Right.
you have analytical and logical, and you have emotional. And so the truth of all books, and I've read them all, is that people buy emotionally, they close with logic, they rationalize with logic, and they buy you. All products are commoditized, they're all equal. So like I'm sitting in Northern Idaho, this client just does a deal. I've been at 3 companies, he keeps buying from me. I'm like, wow, you keep buying my software. Like you must believe in what I'm doing. He says, no, wherever you go, I just buy it. And that truly showed me, right? So storytelling is a function of what I'm doing, but I'm doing pocket stories and micro stories because I got to tell a story in 50 words. And I have to combine these different levels of heuristics. So brevity, social proof that's relevant, specificity. Most emails sound like this. Hey, Park, I'm going to get you 200% revenue growth with my sales AI. And I've worked with tons of podcast hosts to do it. And you're like, BS, 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 false claims.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I get those all the time, by the way.
Which specific podcast code? 200%, not 173%? Is it relevant to me? What's your AI for sales? Because there's so much fake AI, like it's a useless email. So we fix all that with the Justin Michael method. And that's where heuristics can immediately start shading that in. And I can say, hey, I noticed that you used to work at Walgreens. I spent a lot of time in Woonsock, Rhode Island at the CVS headquarters. I've, worked with 3 storytelling brand coaches. I've helped one of them double their clients in 3.5 months by, using these techniques that I built that are neuroscience, game theory backed up to Explorer. So like already you see how I start shifting that and you felt yourself drawn in.
Yeah, I mean, the power of story rests in the specifics. We say that all the time. And what you had led with, the examples of, is the very non-specific BS that we all get with spam emails. And then you boiled it down to the specifics that our brain, and especially our limbic system, loves. I mean, it's looking for specifics to decide, do I have a fight or flight situation here? Is there an opportunity? What do I do next? And you had mentioned at the top of the show about emails that you said if they have 3 paragraphs long and take longer than 13 seconds to get through, that it actually triggers the fight or flight mechanism.
So I go into the limbic system. The first idea for my book was 1910, because then 2010, 2110, 2210, God willing, with global warming and nukes and the wars and all this, but a very sensitive topic. But the idea is that you have 2 brain systems, right? You have this very old system, and then like you have then your frontal cortex, which developed over the last 200,000 years, the final bits. But there's no change in the human 100 years from now, right? When you cold call someone, no matter what you say, you've triggered the croc brain, the lizard brain. It triggers the fight or flight because you've just interrupted them or you irritate them, right? So you have to calm them down like walking up on a horse. So you got to calm down the old brain so the front brain can kick in and start to make sense of you. With emails, if you just bounce off the front brain, it's just like ads in the movie theater. You have to try to provoke and spur emotion out of the old brain systems so that they see it unconsciously, right? And that's just, I'm oversimplifying many facets of the brain, but you just learn the 2. And then the visual cortex is interesting. Like we see a tree, flips upside down, goes here, goes to the front. It's like, I get into some of this in the book. I talk about the limbic system. There's a lot of elements of the brain that allow you to have empathy, curiosity. I think the big thing about my system too is it's all about being radically curious about the prospect. And I even get into more spiritual elements, like I talk about how sales training has traditionally been all tactics and systems and models and methods. And if you take like a 200K person and you train them in the physical world, they make less money because their thoughts are, hey, I have imposter syndrome. I can't do this, limiting beliefs, right? It's not enough. Who are they? What's their identity? You can't take a chain smoker and then just say, hey, decide the next month. Like it's possible. There has to be a lot of commitment, a change of being. lottery winners. You give them, $500 million, they go bankrupt. So what I'm trying to do in this book is move from sales to service and take a service-based approach to prospecting. And that's where it really starts to get metaphysical. And I have diagrams about this too, because a trusted advisor, if the prospect lights up on you on the phone and starts cursing you out, you don't curse them, you don't hate them, you don't feel any resentment. You're like, wow, they're having a bad day. You feel empathy because that's who you're being. It's not even thoughts. It's not even a system of rebuttals. It's just you being elevated in your consciousness about that sale. So if you're truly serving from a place of being, the thinking and the doing come forward. And that's a like hidden aspect. And I've taken that from like different life coaching and spiritual disciplines. But this really helps people feel the mission and do this in like a heart-centered way that's not soul destroying.
Well, I would love to get, with all your studies, because I've studied the limbic system a lot, and storytelling, of course, and starting with the hero's journey, but just found it was far too complex for most, especially business people, to really care about. They don't want to be story theorists. They just want to know, like, how can I do this quickly? And that's when I found the and, but, therefore framework that all my listeners know about a lot. At some point, I would love for you to check it out, because it does take those 3 paragraphs you're talking about, boils them down to 1 or 2 sentences. One very brief paragraph, you can do it in 50 words or less, and it uses and, but, therefore, the 3 forces of story of agreement. You begin with, here's a shared vision of what we want, demonstrating that you understand, appreciate the audience, what they care about. But here's the problem that I'm here to help you solve, which really triggers that limbic brain, like, okay, what do I do next? And then the therefore is your call to action, whatever that might be. Is it jumping on a call? Is it setting a meeting? Whatever that might be. But you can write that email. Of course, it takes a little while to get the process down, but it checks that box that you were talking about being very quick, very short, concise, but also using the story framework of setup, problem, resolution, in the and, but, therefore, that our limbic brain just loves. It's just like, oh, you're serving me up information in the way I want to get it, to create meaning as quickly as possible without burning any calories in the process.
Yeah, so that's what I find is somehow or another, people will come to me and say, hey, I figured that out in 2015, or I figured that out in the 90s at Oracle, because I've synthesized so many different disciplines, but I didn't get to it through reading or different systems. So the reason yours works too is because it's in harmony. It's all gravity. Everything is Newtonian in what I built, because I sat there and I did 20,000 hours on a phone, and I sent millions of emails. And it's like I went up into space and I looked at the Earth. So like you and I have both done that. So like our looking for brevity and compacting it into this tiny package, because of the way the brain, can process really easily. 11 seconds versus 3 seconds, right? If you send a really long email and they F-curve traffic, they track it, they think, is it taxes? Is it the government? It's like, what is this huge email, right? So there's commonality. There's commonality in all the systems. But what I was seeking was what was broken and how do we truly stand out? And so I do think what you're doing with your story framework is a pattern interrupt, because traditionally cold emails are like, intro, it's like, hope you're doing well, but
Right.
like you only get 18 words between the subject line and preview text, and it's being wasted. So we need like a 10-year moratorium on that on that statement.
So, final question for you. What was the heuristics on naming your book Sales Superpowers? There must have been a lot of thought that went into those 2 simple words.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because my first book was called Tech Powered Sales. And so it has power and sales. And this is Sales Superpowers, sales power. So it's a palindrome, the 2 names. The first book was about machines becoming human. The first book was about humans becoming machines using all the AI, right? And this is about humans becoming superhuman, leveraging machines, actually going back to actually being able to have human conversations. It's really interesting if you study Marvel Comics and the history. Superman did well, but Spider-Man is when Stan Lee and the gang took off, because you could imagine this teenager Peter Parker was you. It's a boy, a teen that gets bit by a radioactive spider. So what I'm stating in Tech Powered Sales is buy all this amazing equipment and experience the revolution of all this exoskeleton tech. But here I'm saying any of you, 400 million people, if you just interrupt the pattern and use the same tools that we all have in a different way of communication in business to business, different linguistics, different frameworks and formulas, you will stand out and you can achieve superhuman success with the MacGyver toolkit. So it's really fascinating. Like, it's a fascinating response, because that last book, I was like known for 400 tech stacks, like the most advanced use of all this stuff. But it's not what actually made me successful. What allowed me to break records and bring 6 years of pipeline in 6 months was, my higher level understanding of psychology, game theory, neurolinguistic programming, social dynamics, behavioral psychology, and fusing that all like an armchair scientist. It's rigorous in that I tested it, but it's like Yogi Berraism. Like, one of the things I always say is buyers buy. They know the process. Oh, they bought before. Let's sell to people who buy. So there's a lot of just common sense in this thing, which I think is refreshing for people. I mean, other books like this have lots of studies of rats, and you just like think about what the rats did and try to put it into sales, and it's not practical. I gave tons of examples. That's the big thing. There's tons of framework examples.
Justin, I was going to ask you, what are you most proud of with this book?
Well, I have had the pleasure and privilege to coach one-to-one hundreds of clients. And, one of them named Mike came back to me, and he had literally 4x'd his income. And he said, if I'd never met you, I wouldn't have done that. And he had tears in his eyes, like, you've helped me and my family and my life. And it's the transformation. It's being able to touch people's lives. And I put out these guides, which anyone listening, they're called the Codex guides or codices. Don't worry, they're not religious texts. They're just growth hacks for email calling, social selling, all this stuff. 17 of these guides. I released them on Reddit, 25,000 of them. And people came back to me, even one today. He goes, we have literally driven millions of dollars using this. Like, people just set up businesses. Like, the techniques I've released in the world are going to outlive me. And that's the coolest part. It's the legacy.
That is very cool. Where can people learn more about you and get your book?
So the book URL is just salessuperpowers.com. You could also just go to justinmichaelmethod.com. It takes you to my LinkedIn. You can follow me there. The sequel is called Justin Michael Method 2.0. And I'm a bit of a Willy Wonka. I don't do a ton of appearances, but just trying to get out there to a wider audience. I'd love to help you. 99% of people interface with me, they just use my open source content and get my books. So please leave a review and kick the tires, throw some rocks, put it to the test.
Well, you had mentioned that this was the first podcast you've been on in about 2 years. So I want to thank you for taking the time and sharing your insights with our readers out there. We'll certainly have a link in the show notes to your book, and I wish you great success with it. I can't wait to finally get through it now.
Thanks, Park. It's been a pleasure.
What a great show today, and I'm so glad you were here for it. Now, if you have an annual sales meeting coming up or planning one for early next year and you want to 10x the success of your team through storytelling, then give me a call or shoot me a note to park@businessofstory.com. I'm here for you with proven in-person, virtual, and hybrid storytelling mastery courses, keynotes, and I can even help your people excel through the stories they tell with a DIY online course. So my schedule is filling up. Reach out right now to park@businessofstory.com. Thanks for listening, and I want to give a big shout out to our editor, Caden Howell, Marissa Hill, who handles marketing, and of course the music, which is exclusively composed by the one and only Darius Holbert. Join us next Monday when Peter Brooks will be with us. He is the Sterling Professor Emeritus of Comparative Literature at Yale University and author of Seduced by Story, The Use and Abuse of Narrative. He's going to join us with the big question: is narrative and storytelling too prominent in the business and political world today, and what should we do about it? So until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is a story you tell yourself. So make it epic. And thank you so much for listening.